Yeah, so really I'm very honored to be here today to talk with you all. And really, thank you, Philip, and everybody for the introduction and all the amazing work that has been put into this exhibit today. For me, this work has really been a labor of love, and I'm excited to discuss the research that we've done on the Belf family. So as you heard from my introduction, and I think Philip actually cited me as an expert, I am certainly no expert. I am just an accountant from New Jersey. I have no professional experience in any of this research, and again, this has really just been a labor of love of mine, researching my wife's family. And so I really will do my best to provide a compelling presentation about the Belf family and really do their story justice. So why don't we jump right in? So again, my name is Adam Krupnick, and I'm the spouse of a Belf family member, my wife right here, as she is the great-great-granddaughter of Joel Moses Belf, the original patriarch of the Belf family bookstore and book publishing business. So here's a picture of my wife and I. We were married in 2013, and I heard a little bit about the story of the Belf family once we first got married, but it really wasn't until 2016 when I started researching the family, and here's the reason why. So this is a picture of my daughter. She was born in May of 2016. You can see her sleeping soundly in her bassinet there. Now my wife and I, we were pretty nervous first-time parents, so we had our daughter's bassinet in our bedroom just a few feet away from our bed. And so my daughter, she'd wake up in the middle of the night, we'd feed her, we'd change her, and then she'd fall back asleep, but it could be 2, 3, or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I personally couldn't always fall asleep after my daughter did. So I know, as any new parent knows, you never want to do anything whatsoever to wake a sleeping baby. So I really had to come up with some sort of quiet activity that I could do while my daughter was sleeping just a few feet away from me, so that I wouldn't wake her. And so it was probably because she was just a few weeks old and we were thinking about who she was named for and was thinking about who others had been named for, that I really started thinking about the Belf family and their story in Vienna. So as that quiet activity, I really decided to look more into the Belf family. And so this is back in 2016, before ChatGPT and that kind of thing. So I basically did what any amateur research of the day did, was I simply went to Google and I typed in Belf family Vienna. And I was actually really surprised to find that some relevant information came up. And the first thing you see here was a presentation by Dr. Monica Schreiber at the Association of Jewish Libraries Conference in 2015, where she discussed the restitution of 3 books back to my wife's family, to my wife's great aunt Gertie, who lived in Texas, which is pretty far from us, and this is a story I had never heard before. So I figured this is fantastic. I might as well reach out to Monica and kind of establish a little bit of a relationship. So that's what you can see here. So about 3 weeks after my daughter was born, I reached out to Monica, just explained who I was, that I was researching the Belf family, and trying to find out if there was any more information about the family that she could share with me. And she was gracious enough. She emailed me back just a few hours later, and that's where the connection first started. And I must have been up in the middle of the night, because I then emailed her back. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. She actually thought it was a crazy person at first. She couldn't figure out what was going on. This person from America was emailing her like in the middle of the night. And ultimately, when I did meet her, it kind of made more sense. But anyway, so let me tell you a little bit about the Belf family. So again, the Belfs were a multi-generational family of book publishers and bookstore owners. Again, the patriarch of the family was Joel Moses Belf, and he was born in 1846 in Ukraine. Now, Joel Moses and his wife Babette actually had 10 children. We have this great picture here from 1890 of Joel Moses and his wife, along with 9 of those 10 children. At the age of 22, Joel Moses Belf actually did establish his business in 1868, and it was originally located at Steiten Gasse 8. And so as we can see here, a modern-day picture of Vienna. We have the Danube River, and we have the Austrian Parliament and the University of Vienna. Again, the bookstore was kind of centrally located amongst all of those. So about 13 years after the bookstore opened and they were starting to sell other people's books, the family started publishing their own books. And the very first book I've been able to find that they published was from 1881. You can see reference here to Joel Moses Belf in 1881, and again reference to that bookstore at Steiten Gasse. And this is a book I was able to find as part of the National Library of Israel. Now, as was mentioned, the bookstore did move, and actually, I apologize, I did just find this information out only a few weeks ago, and that's the beauty of doing this research, is I'm constantly finding out new information. But the first bookstore was at Steiten Gasse, and apparently in 1901 it actually moved to Rothgasse 17, which I had never known up until a few weeks ago. So if you orient yourself again to modern-day Vienna, and the first bookstore is here, if you kind of zoom in at the centermost section, And you can see again modern day Vienna, you can see the first bookstore, you can see that street. But unfortunately the street ends at number 11. So the question is, where is 17? It doesn't seem to exist. So if I kind of overlay on top of that an 1887 map, and again you see that first bookstore, and you can see the street again as well. 17 is located right here, and so let's overlay again back a modern day map, and you can see that's exactly where Reibensteig 1 is today. So kind of back and forth, you can kind of see that. And now we're even fortunate enough to have found a picture of what this building actually looked like. You can see it here. It looks like a pretty good building from what I can see. But unfortunately the bottom of this picture actually says that it's an old Viennese house in danger of collapse, and this picture was taken right before it was demolished. So apparently that didn't go very well. And so we actually have what exactly happened to it, and there's this 1903 Vienna newspaper that I found that said apparently the building was in imminent danger of collapse, and the city ordered all the residents and businesses to leave immediately. And there were 6 tenants on the floors, and then there were 4 businesses on the ground floor, and one of them was the Belf bookstore. So the Belf bookstore was at the second location from 1901 to 1903. So it was time for the Belf bookstore to again move, and you can see from the first bookstore, Steitensteingasse, it moved to Ruckgasse 17, and so the third bookstore moved all the way 30 meters away, so just right next door. So really big move they had. But why this area? Of course, as was kind of said earlier, this was the Jewish quarter, and right around the corner from that beautiful Stad temple that was right there. Now we're even very fortunate to have a picture of the Belf bookstore from 1913, as you can see here, reference to Joel Moses Belf. And this is actually part of the Albert Kahn Museum in France, and it was taken by a photographer named Auguste Leon. And it's almost like this photographer happened to be working for the Belf family that day. He was able even to get further pictures. So if you kind of zoom in on this rightmost section, it's as if like the doors were kind of opened, and you can see the interior of that little glass section and the different books and periodicals that were available for sale. Now, Joel Moses Belf continued publishing books, and overall he was rather successful. He published 33 books over his time, and they were published again from 1881, that first book that we saw, that Passover Regatta, all the way through 1914. And all the books were religious in nature. They were all Jewish books. And unfortunately, Joel Moses Belf did die in 1913, and we even have a copy of his obituary here as well. Now, if we kind of turn back to that big family picture we had from before, fortunately, one of the children of Joel Moses Belf did take up the mantle and continue the business on. And you see Joseph Belf here in the middle, and so he took up the mantle and continued the business. So a little bit about Joseph. He was actually born in 1883, so he took over the business when he was only 30 years old. And in 1919, he received approval to trade in Jewish books himself. Once again, we're fortunate enough to have a picture of Joseph at his bookstore. We think this picture dates to somewhere around 1920. You can see reference to Joseph here, and we even have a picture of Joseph standing in front of his store right there as well. So if you were to kind of compare those two bookstores side by side, the one on the left by Joel Moses Belf, the one on the right by Joseph Belf, both are at Reibensteig 3. You can see it definitely is the exact same location. You can see like the 3 defined sections on the left-hand side and the 1 defined section on the right. Definitely showing it's the same location. Now, of course, this is the early 1900s. There's no internet. Customers have to come to the bookstore in order to buy books. But apparently the family was advertising as well, and I found a copy of this Yiddish language newspaper dating to 1918, and you can see reference to Joel Moses Belf, Reibensteig 3, and I guess he was advertising particular books that he had for sale along with their various prices. But apparently it wasn't just locally in Vienna that they were advertising. I also was recently able to find this Croatian newspaper, it dates to 1931, and it's actually talking about a new book that they had just published. It's a children's book, and you can see reference here to Joel Moses Belf at Reibensteig 3. But it wasn't just newspaper advertising that the family did. They actually had a book catalog, and so I was able to find in Serbia, of all places, an actual copy of a book catalog dating to 1930. And on the interior of the book, it listed various books that were for sale along with the prices that they had. And I was able even to find a sales flyer, and I guess there were 5 particular books that they had on special, and it talks about those books, and both of these 2 pieces are part of the exhibit here today as well. Now imagine if you're a customer in the early 1900s and you're living outside Vienna, You have to correspond with the family in some sort of fashion, and actually that's exactly what I found here. There's actually a postcard that I was able to find, and you can see here reference to Joseph Belf, dating to 1925, and it's correspondence back and forth with a customer in Athens, Greece. It's with the B'nai B'rith Lodge, which was actually a Jewish organization, and so it's discussing the sale of a book. And so I was very fortunate to find this piece. Overall, Joseph Belf, he had a pretty large family. He had 5 children. His oldest was Fred Belf, that's my wife's grandfather, along with sons Max, Hugo, Aegon, and youngest daughter Gertie. We even have a picture of them. This is Joseph and his wife, along with son Max and Gertie, and they're actually vacationing in a resort town in Austria. From their appearances, they're very well dressed. They seem to be overall doing financially very well and a rather successful business overall. Similarly, we see a picture here of Fred and Pearl Belf. Again, this is my wife's grandparents, along with Pearl's brother, Irving Summerstein. Again, very well dressed. They're in this resort town, seemingly like they have a very successful business overall. But of course, during the 1930s, for a Jewish bookstore, it wasn't always easy. And we see examples of that starting right in 1934, this Jewish Review publication. And if you kind of zoom in this section here, it talks about in June 1934, there actually was a bombing at the bookstore. I guess fortunately there was only damage to the property and nobody was hurt as it happened after business hours. Now, despite the difficult circumstances, the business continued to thrive into the 1930s, and Joseph continued publishing books. In total, he published 38 books. And interestingly, both these books were not just religious in nature, but they also started branching out to other subjects that were non-religious in nature as well. But of course, things rapidly changed when in March 1938, Germany seized Austria, and from there it was probably pretty obvious to the Belfs that it was time to leave Austria if they could. And that's exactly what we see here. First we see 2 of the sons, Hugo and Aegon. They traveled all the way to Greece, where they boarded a boat heading to what is now Israel. From family stories, we understand that when the boat actually got close to the shore, they weren't able to dock, and Hugo and Aegon left all their possessions on the boat, jumped off the boat, and swam to shore, and that's how they were able to survive. Similar to them, the next month, in June 1940, leaving from Cherbourg in France on the SS Queen Mary, were Fred and Pearl Belf, again my wife's grandparents, and they were headed to their uncle in New Jersey. So by June of 1938, only 3 months after Germany had annexed Austria, 3 of the 5 grown children of the Belfs had already left Austria. But what happened to the remaining 2 children, and also Joseph and Bloom, the parents? So from here, we have this Immigration Department document. It's filled out by Max, of one of those 2 children that remained in Austria. And it says here his plan is to leave along with his parents and his sister. And his plan is to leave, I guess rather enthusiastically, all together. He's got that exclamation point there at the end. And this is signed by Max in May of 1938. So at the same time that the rest of the family was working on leaving, so was Max and the rest of the family working as leaving as well. But unfortunately, they were not able to leave from them. From family stories, we've heard that the visa that they were trying to get to come to America, there was some sort of issue and they weren't able to leave just then. And only 6 months later, it had already become too late for the remaining Belfs to leave Austria. On November 9th and 10th, 1938, the events of Kristallnacht, often referred to as the Night of Broken Glass or the November pogroms, marked a dramatic escalation of violence against the Jewish communities in Germany and Austria. Across Germany and Austria, synagogues were desecrated, Jewish businesses were destroyed, and thousands of Jews were arrested. And here we see pictures of the destruction of that beautiful Stad temple in Vienna on Kristallnacht. And this was just one of the 1,400 synagogues destroyed on those days, including the one that's right here in Heidelberg, as we know. In another image, we see SS men also on Kristallnacht. And looking at the present day, we can clearly identify this as right outside that Stad temple. And when comparing the images side by side, it becomes clear that this is the same location. You can see the door matches up, as do all the windows. And as we saw earlier, this was right around the corner from where the Belf bookstore was, placing the violence of Kristallnacht right at the family's doorstep, which raises the question, what happened to the Belfs that were still remaining in Vienna? From that, we actually have these 400 pages of documents that are received from the Austrian State Archives, the first of which was a letter that was written by Max Belf, and it discusses his experience. It says, on November 10th, 1938, again on Kristallnacht, he was arrested at his parents' apartment and he spent 4 weeks in custody where he was ultimately released with broken ribs. Similar to him, we have this letter from Bloom, which discusses, in the name of my husband, the Jew Joseph Belf, bookseller at Rabensteig 3. He was also arrested November 10th, 1938, and he was unfortunately sent to Dachau. And what happened to the bookstore that they had at Rabensteig 3? Well, apparently it was seized and sealed by the authorities. So the question then becomes, why did Joseph end up going to Dachau, and his son Max ended up being able to stay in Vienna despite going to prison? Well, from some family stories, we found out that apparently on the day that they were arrested, both of them were standing in line, headed to Dachau, and Joseph had some quick thinking, and he actually physically pushed his son Max into a separate line, and Joseph ended up at Dachau, and his son ended up staying in Vienna. And of course, my next step in the process was to confirm the incarceration of Joseph at Dachau, which they were able to do. So he arrived 15th November 1938, so really only 5 days after he was arrested in Vienna, he was already at Dachau, and we were able even to find the original entry log referencing his name. Now, I guess fortunately he was able to be released the 3rd of January 1939, and we do have a copy of his exit card here as well. Now, having gone through this tremendous ordeal, and from what we understand, he was tortured there as well, it was probably very clear to him that the Belf should leave Austria for good, if they could. And that's exactly what we see next. We see another Emigration Department document, this time filled out by Joseph. Once again, the plan is to leave with his wife and his 2 remaining children. Once again, the plan is for them to leave all together. But if you remember from a moment ago, Joseph was incarcerated in Dachau until the 3rd of January 1939. But if we actually look at the date that he filled out that Emigration Department document, signed by himself, it was completed in December of 1938. So he's filling out the Emigration Department document while he was still incarcerated at Dachau. So what do the Belfs do next? We have this picture of them, of Joseph and his wife, along with their daughter Gertie. And this is presumably taken by their other son Max. On the back of this picture that I found, it actually says April 1939, so only 3 months after Joseph was released from Dachau. And where are they? They're in Switzerland. And so they traveled about 900 kilometers from Austria and Switzerland. But why Switzerland? Apparently a couple of reasons. First, Joseph had some business connections there, so from the book publishing business, he was able to have those connections, which actually, from my understanding, is how my wife's grandfather, Fred Belf, was able to get one of those visas to come to America in the first place. In addition, the remaining 4 Belfs were able to actually acquire a visa to go to Switzerland, is my understanding, and there was even a family connection there as well. So if we go back to that picture from a few minutes ago, we have a picture of Fred and Pearl Belf, again, my wife's grandparents. This was Irving Summerstein, my wife's grandmother's brother. He was already in Switzerland, working at a watch factory there. But why this specific town in Switzerland? Well, apparently one of those pieces of information that I again just found out just a few weeks ago, according to the Library of Israel. This specific town had a population of about 1,000 Jews, and between the years 1938 and 1940, they were helping Jews as they were Jewish refugees as they were passing through, and they helped in total about 130 different Jews with financial and other support, so about the exact same time that the Belfs were there. But of course, the plan wasn't for them to stay in Switzerland, they wanted to come to America, and that's exactly what we see next. So having come from Austria to Switzerland, they then turned south and went to Genoa, Italy, where on January 1940, about 1 year after Joseph was released from Dachau, they're leaving on the SS Manhattan. And once again, who is it? Those 4 Belfs that were traveling together, along now with a couple of those Summersteins that were also in Switzerland as well. And they were headed towards my wife's grandfather, who was Fred Belf, who had again arrived in New Jersey in June 1938. And the SS Manhattan landed about 9 days later. And so that's how it was for the Belfs. Joseph and his wife, they lived in Brooklyn in New York. And we have this picture from April of 1944 of Joseph and his wife, along with their grandson, we think is Burton. Now, unfortunately, only a few months after this picture was taken, Joseph passed away. We have his death certificate here. And it says in August 1944, he did die of cancer. And that's how it was for the Belfs. The children all spread out, having started in Austria. Hugo and Aegon, as we mentioned, arrived in what is now Israel. Fred landed up in New Jersey. Gertie ended up in Texas. And Max ended up in Colorado. Now, having really learned so much about the Belf family, I really did want to learn more about the book publishing business, and that's what we started doing next. So, the accountant and me had lists and spreadsheets, and so I came up with a list of about 70 books in total that they published, and we started going online and trying to buy as many of those as we could. And so we've in total been able to acquire 28 of those. In addition, we've been able to find digital copies of at least 10 more, So in total, we have access to more than half of all the books that were ever published by the Belf family. In addition to that, we were able to find 4 books that were sold through the bookstore, and I think, as a couple of the presentations explained earlier, how there were various stamps and labels and stickers that represented the fact that it had passed through the bookstore at some point. So we purchased 4 of those as well. And been able to acquire them from various websites online, and much like the Belf children that ended up scattering all over the world, so did these books, and I was able to purchase them in 9 different countries, including the US, Israel, Italy, Switzerland, France, UK, Netherlands, Germany, and Austria as well. I guess it's been said already a little bit more about the fact, so again, if the Belf family had published a book, obviously their name would be printed on that title page, but if a book had just passed through their bookstore, and as you saw as part of the presentation, as you were, exhibit as you were kind of walking in, there are various labels and stamps and stickers that we've been able to find, and here's some examples of ones of Joel Moses Belf and Joseph Belf. Also, my secret of the presentation that's been hiding in plain sight the whole time was at the top of the presentation was one of those from Joel Moses Belf, and another one from Joseph Belf, and then there were also examples of those stamps, so just ink stamps on the interior of a book. Here's one from Joel Moses Belf, and here's one from Joseph Belf. So as we started to acquire these books, we wanted to prominently display them in our house. And so here's a picture of the bookshelf in our house, and we've affectionately titled that top shelf the Belf shelf. And the really interesting thing about it is, you know, again, the accountant to me, it's got the lists and the spreadsheets and stuff, but really once you start buying the books and purchasing them, you actually really do start learning more about the family. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of those books as well. And so first we have a copy of a prayer book that was published by Joel Moses Belf in 1889. You can see the tan color on the left-hand side, and here's one, Joseph Belf, published by his son. The 2 books look very similar, but one is in tan and one is in black, but both have the same elaborate design in the middle. But apparently it wasn't just these 2 colors that the books were available. So I found out from Philip, who sent me this picture. Actually, it was available in purple as well, and that's part of the exhibit here. And it was even available in this red color as well. So pretty cool to see that it was available in a multitude of different colors. We also have a copy of this children's book that I was able to purchase as well. And if you remember from a little while ago, this was that same book that was published, advertised in that Croatian magazine. And, you know, gave reference to, you know, if they wanted to acquire it, they should, you know, contact the Belf family. But if I overlay on top of this my specific copy of it, you actually see in the middle here a label that says that it was approved by the Austrian Ministry of Education in 1931 as a grade school textbook. And apparently the school district still exists in Vienna today. So, you know, had I not purchased this specific copy, I never would have found out this information and found out that the Belfs were helping to educate a generation of Jewish students. Now, the final books that were published by the family were in 1938 and 1939. You can see here one of the books, The Yellow Church on the left-hand side, and a book about Spain on the right-hand side. You can see very similar nature of the way that the books were printed, the red coloring, the location of the words, and even the picture. And interestingly, this was actually, as you can see, obviously not Jewish books, but this was the passion of my wife's grandfather, Fred Belf, who was working on becoming that 3rd generation of book publishers right up until 1938 when the bookstore ended. And both of these 2 books are actually available at the Heidelberg University Library Collection. Though as I found out yesterday, trying to go there and actually find them, they had to be ordered, and so it wasn't exactly so easy for me to find. Now again, in addition to having purchased books, we've also been working on the restitution of various books, so we've been able to get the restitution of 5 books back from 4 different institutions, including the Municipal Library of Nuremberg, which is the IKG collection. We have a Jewish kids calendar here. You can see reference to the IKG collection here, and again, one of those stickers that was on the interior, referencing the fact that it had passed through at some point from the Belf bookstore. We've also gotten a book from the University of Potsdam, a university in Berlin, and also there's a book at Dachau on permanent loan. Now, interestingly, the bookstore didn't just sell books. If you remember from a few minutes ago, that book catalog, so if you were actually to look at the back side of that book catalog, it said a bunch of other things that were for sale, including talit, fine embroidery, and even Torah scrolls, and modern Jewish antiques. And we were able to find a couple of examples of those. And so here's a bunch of Torah mantle covers that are held at the Prague Jewish Museum. And on the interior of that, you can see reference to those labels, referencing the fact that they were sold by Joel Moses Belf, again at Rheinbach Stag 3. In addition to that, the family even published some ketubas. You can see reference here. Here's an example of one from the University of Vienna. And here's an example of another one from the National Library of Israel that was published by Joseph Belf. Now, over the years, it really has been a fantastic collaboration with Dr. Monica Schreiber at the University of Vienna, and we're able even to present together at the Association of Jewish Libraries Conference in 2022. So again, that's the same conference that Monica presented at in 2015, where she discussed the restitution of those books, which was the presentation that I found, which is what made me reach out to her, which led me ultimately here to be with you all today. And here's a picture from that day of myself and Monica, and my wife, my mother-in-law, and my brother-in-law. And so again, it was really a fantastic, bringing together everything from having found that presentation to then being able to present with Monica in 2022. We were also even able to present at the Hebrew Union College in December of 2022. And over the years, we've corresponded back and forth over 700 times. I'm always really excited every time I find a new piece of information. I send it off to Monica, or if she finds something and she's sending it off to me. My children, as you can see, are a little older now, so I don't email her at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. It's more normal hours, but it has always been a fantastic collaboration. And honestly, I never could have imagined when I sent this first email back to Monica in May of 2016 where it would ultimately lead. And so 9 years later, as you heard, in April 2025, my family and I found ourselves in Vienna for the opening of a Belf exhibit honoring our family. It still feels surreal and crazy to me that this has all come together. And on the day we first arrived in Vienna last year, one of the first things we did was walk over to the site where the final Belf bookstore was at Rabensteig 3. And immediately upon getting close, my wife and I were overcome with emotion, thinking about the Belf family and what was once there. We could feel the Belf's life in Vienna and all they lost, and now we were walking on the exact streets where they once had. So last year when we opened that first Belf exhibit in Vienna, we felt an immense sense of pride seeing the Belf family name displayed so prominently in that city for the first time in more than 86 years. And it's with tremendous gratitude that I acknowledge Philip here, who, as you heard, went and visited this exhibit in Vienna and saw the importance of continuing this work, and who made possible the second exhibit here today. To see the Belf family story carried forward not just in Vienna, but now in Heidelberg is truly amazing. The family is just overwhelmed with appreciation that efforts like this exist, that people care enough to preserve these histories, to listen to these stories, and to ensure that names like theirs are not lost to time. So from the very bottom of our hearts, thank you to Philip and everyone who played a role in bringing this exhibit here today. Words cannot express how truly grateful we are. Thank you.